your finding definitely will, I think it impacts the reliable and validity of your finding. So move to the next slide. So we'll start our discussion by reading this two statement. I'd like to start my discussion. In quantitative research, selecting the appropriate analysis method is not just a technical decision, it is a strategic one. So the very important point so you have to understand is that the one that directly impact the validity, reliability, and also the generalizability of your finding. So is the key point, so you have to understand that it's not just a technical decision, so selecting the appropriate analysis method. So there you have, strategically you have to do that. So the based on the what you have selected the method now really impacts your validity, reliability, and the generalizability of your finding. So the key point you have to understand here is that your finding, not the should, must be valid, reliable, and also the it should be generalizability. So these are the key points. So you have to understand before coming to other particular discussion on that. And also the next important point is that I have to convey is that an accurate analysis method ensure that the data collected can be interpreted correctly, allowing researcher to draw meaningful conclusion, make informed recommendation, and contribute effectively to the body of knowledge in the discipline. So remember that if you have a selected accurate analysis, so you can see here, you can draw a meaningful conclusion. Not only that, so very confidently you can make informed recommendation. And also the next important point is contribute effectively to the body of knowledge in their discipline. So my experience is that undergraduate now you can each and every way you are conducting the research that to what extent so you have selected the best or the accurate analysis method. So having understood that, having realized that issue, that we decide to either discuss this kind of thing. But anyhow, we don't have either much time to in detail discuss, but anyhow, I can give the basic understanding when you select the accurate analysis method, how you can do that, what would be the impact, all these matters. So we will discuss in today's discussion. So get the idea on that, the importance of choosing the right analysis method. If you made the mistake that when you choose your right analysis method, what happened? Using an unsuitable method can lead to misleading your conclusion, invalid generalization, loss of research credibility. So understand you are going to do the research, especially quantitative research. Now you collected the real data, actual data very correctly, but when you select the incorrect method, incorrect analysis tool, really it will mislead you conclude. So, and not only that, even it will impact the generalization of your result, and also the remember that the credibility is the issue. And having understood that point, so it is better to discuss, I think. I will discuss with you very simply the factor to consider when selecting quantitative analysis method. I believe that if I give the discussion that what are the factors to be considered when you are going to select the quantitative analysis method, I believe that so simply so you can select the best analytical method. Factor to consider when selecting the quantitative analysis method. These are the one is the research objective and the questions. One important factor to consider when you select, when you choose a quantitative analysis method is remember that so you have to focus to your research objective and the questions. Not only that, you have to take into account nature and the level of measurement of variable, and also the sample size is very, very important. Only that number of variable and their role and the distributions and the assumption. These key factors are very, very important. So we will take, I think, few minutes to discuss one by one. The first we will take the research objective and questions when you are going to select the quantitative analysis method. So remember that you have to focus to your research objective and the question. Based on that, so you have to select the particular analytical tool and the method. The primary guide in selecting an analysis method is remember that your research question. Are you looking to compare? Look at that your research question. Are you looking to compare, predict, explain the relationship, or maybe describe trend? And each objective point to specific method. So that your study is focusing on descriptive studies, the friends and the students. So you have to, the best method is descriptive statistic. You get the descriptive statistic. Basically, I think you have learned that econometric statistic and the wherever. But anyhow, descriptive statistics is the very important. The methods and the tools that can use specially for the descriptive study. Your research question is the focusing on the descriptive studies. So you select the descriptive statistics. So in that context, the mean, median, mode, frequency, range, standard deviation, variance, all these things, so you have learned. So this is actually called the descriptive. I will even elaborate later on for the being remember that. So your study focusing on the descriptive studies. Now you have to select the descriptive statistic. So in that case, mean, median, mode, and frequency. Now that kind of aspect. So you can use that kind of things and you can interpret your result and something like. And your study, your research question or the objective is research, comparative study. Then get the point that case, my dear friends and students, so you can use the t-test, ANOVA, and chi-square. You study the focusing the correlation study. So that is Pearson or maybe Spearman correlation. That is, you can use the correlation. Then if you study the predictive study, and there you can use the regression analysis. I'll discuss in the later on for the beam. Remember that now this is actually the important factors to be considered when you select the best alternative, especially the research objective and question, under which so you have to understand this key point. Your study is focusing on the causal study. That is, you can use the experimental design with ANOVA or multivariate analysis. So we'll continue our discussion. The second important factor to be considered when selecting the best analysis tool is that nature and the level of measurement of variable is must take into account. Nature and the level of measurement of variable. It's obvious fact that the statistical method differ based on whether your variables are nominal, ordinal, and interval or the ratio. So remember that is the quantitative or qualitative research. So these are the kind of, I think, variable you can use. It may be sometimes nominal, it may be ordinal, it may be interval or the ratio, nothing more than that. So get the point that now your data, your variable nominal or maybe ordinal. So that is exciting. So you can use the non-parametric method. Now try to understand that point. You in research, you are using some kind of nominal, ordinal, and remember that you have to use the non-parametric method. There are some conditions, even we'll list later on that. And what are the type of non-parametric method you have learned? I maybe sometime statistic or maybe sometime econometrics, wherever, even it doesn't matter. So I think now the open sources are there. You can learn that nominal and ordinal data, use non-parametric, like the chi-square. I think it's a very simple method. I will tell that even how to use it and how to interpret the result and where you can use all these matters. We remember that. So that's actually statistical tool. You can use a chi-square, especially when you are going to analyze the nominal and the ordinal data. Chi-square and the Whitney U-test is a non-parametric statistical tool, is a I think theoretical proof to methods. You use that to undergraduate students, especially when you use the nominal and ordinal data case. So what would be the interval and the ratio? There, my dear students, so you can use the parametric method. Parametric method, like you have heard that maybe sometimes you have used that t-test and the regression, so you can use that example. So further to elaborate, that is here. Okay, nature and the level of variable. Later, even in detail, we'll discuss this matter. Right. So move to the next important factor to be considered. That is sample size. Sample size is very important. Students are asking, even some people are asking when you are going to do that now. So how whether sample size is sufficient or sufficient, and how many variable, how data observation we need, all these matters are there. Remember that when you choose the analysis tool, analytical method, sample size is very important factor to be considered. The certain method require minimum sample size of accuracy. So it's just remember that key point here. I can convey the message for understanding purpose. There are small samples. If you use a small sample, use non-parametric test. How you define the small sample, I think the number of observation, I think my experience, the below 9, the number of observation is better to use the non-parametric test. Small samples, basically, that is number of observation, the below 9. So I think my experience, maybe sometime here expertise here, even you can give later on that comment even. And the large sample, my dear students, for parametric method, and also you can use the complex multivariate analysis. So for your understanding purpose, now I will look at this slide and you can understand, my dear students, the methods and minimum recommended sample size. This is actually not the hard and fast rule, but anyhow, for you, I think level now, try to understand this one. You student are always asking that what is the minimum, the sample size that you can use for each and every test. Now, I'll give the rough idea on that one. Especially this is a parametric test, like the t-test. In that case, remember that more than 34, that is, we are addressing the, we have to take into account the data normality. So at least you need, my dear students, 30 or more than this better, I think. In the ANOVA case, that is 20, 30 for groups, depending on the basic. Remember that in design. Regression, you are always asking that. That is multiple regression, especially, that is whatever, then 10 to 15 observation per predictor. I think averagely you can use that. And some students are even using structural equation modeling and whatever. I think in that case, I think you need the large sample. Otherwise, I don't think that you can get the either valid and reliable information, reliable conclusion and the finding. More than 2,000 observation you need. So get that rough idea on that, right? We'll continue our discussion. Now, this is the next important factor to be considered when you select the best, I think, analytical tool and then analysis tool. Number of variables students are asking, and also their role is better get the idea on that. This is I can give this simply idea on that. When you select the number of variables, students asking that number of variables, and also what would be their role in all these matters. So you have to understand which variable are independent, dependent, and maybe the control variable. So get the idea on that. Yeah, one independent, I mean here one independent variable, and also the one dependent variable. Simple regression or the t-test, I think better to use that. And also there are the multiple independent variable and also the dependent variable. In that case, that we can use the multiple regression and not only even the MANOVA or the structural, the semi-structural modeling and so forth. So get the idea on that, and when you select the, I think, particular analysis method, number of variable and the roles are very, very important, right? And also the next important, it's another important factor to be considered, the students, when you select the analysis tool, is that distribution and the assumption is a very critical issue. And check if your data meet assumption of the normality, homogeneity of variance and independence. So that's actually the practitioner and the researchers say that the distribution should be, you have to check if your data meet the assumption of normality, homogeneity of variance and independent. I think all these matters. So basically you have learned that you have syllabus content on the wherever. Even if you learn, if you do not understand, now it's time to do that. That is your assumption of normality, what it is, how to do that, and the different I think tests are there, everything homogeneous variance to test there. There are different tests are there, and the independent all these matters. But the distribution, so you have to check that if your data meet assumption normality, homogeneity of variance and independent. So remember that if your data set actually not violate this assumption, you are, it's a very, I think that data set is a qualified, which means that ensure that you can get the valid, reliable finding. And if the assumption are violated, remember that now you may learn that you have to choose the robust or the non-parametric test. There you have, in some reasons, in the most case, so you cannot see the data normality, homogeneity of variance, and maybe independence. Them should maybe with your data set. So what can you do? Remember, alternatives are there. If assumptions are violated, so you can choose the robust. There are some, I think, some statistical tool, and also you can use the non-parametric test. In that case, especially that our students we asking that how you can test or check this assumption. There are, I think, the plenty of the packages are there. So the tool, use tool like, histogram, very simply, QQ plot, and not only that, Shafrio will test to, you can really assess the normality. And further to elaborate, I incorporated another information to this discussion, that is the most the most statistical test basically rely on specific assumption, like remember violating them may lead to misleading your result. Now that's the point, so you have to understand. For your understanding purpose, you see that here assumption, the one column, so you can see the here one column assumption, the other importance and the test that require. How you can test the normality assumption? The importance is here, why we select, why we do the normality. Remember that the data should be normally distributed, when you use, especially for the, it's called quantitative research, when you use the data set, that data set should be normally distributed. What kind of test you can use? T-test, ANOVA, regression. That, remember that when you use T-test, ANOVA and the regression, that you have to check that particular data set is normality or not. The normality is, I think, the one assumption. So if that violate, definitely misleading your result, remember that. Once again, I will tell that when you use the t-test ANOVA regression, data should be normally distributed. Now that is the statistician say. Otherwise dangerous. Remember that if your data set is not normally distributed, really it will misleading your result. Now that is actually the my understanding. And another important assumption when you use your data set, that is homogeneity of variance. It's a very important other one. It's called homogeneity of variance, which means that when you use your data, especially when you use the ANOVA and the t-test, equal variance across groups are must. Homogeneity of variance, so you have to do that ANOVA. When you use the ANOVA and the t-test, remember that. So you have to check that homogeneity of variance. And another important assumption is that using the statistically linearity. Linear relationship between variables, especially when you use the regression, the linear regression, maybe nonlinear regression also there, but anyhow, remember that when you use the linear relationship between variable, in that case, if you use the regression, that data should be linearity. Now that is the assumption. And the other important aspect is, point is, assumption is that independence of the observation. Independence of observation. So the importance is, you can see here, observation should not influence each other. So in that, remember that almost all parametric tests, so you have to test the independence of observation. The observation not to influence each other. This all this matter. So my advising is now, the check before you test using method like you see the Safre will test for normality and the Levens t-test for equal variance, scatter plot for linearity, and Tobin Watson for the independence. There may be other more than that, but the undergraduate level now, you just try to make practice to use these. I think quite enough for your study. Okay, my dear students, now that is what we actually, what is actually you are expecting, that how you can select the best method for your data analysis purposes. So then I really summarize, put into the all these quantitative analysis methods into the one table this way. So I put a common quantitative analysis method. So this is a very simple table where we explain that point. Common quantitative analysis method. I believe that looking and by reading this particular table, you can understand very simply that particular. Even you can get the idea how you are going to select the best method. So this table is, I think, so very simply you can use that. So this table, you see the first column number, I put that analysis method, second column purpose, and the third columns I put the example use case. So analysis method, descriptive, as earlier mentioned, that one of the important analysis method is descriptive statistic. What is the purpose? You can summarize the data. So example use case, mean satisfaction level among customers. You want to find the result to the study, you have to find the mean satisfaction level among customer. It's better to you can use the descriptive statistic, my student. Analysis t-test. There are, I think, t-test independent and the paired. These matters we'll discuss even. So you are maybe sometimes you are very familiar as you have learned the t-test. It's a very simple statistical method tool you can use, especially for compare mean between the group. You need to compare mean between the group. For example, you see that text score differences between male and female. So simply you can use the t-test or independent t-test. And the analysis method ANOVA, maybe one way, two way, different types are there. Then in that case, what is the purpose? Compare means across multiple groups. Example, effect of teaching method on your test score. chi-square, another important analysis method, chi-square test. You have to examine the association between categorical variable. Remember, categorical variable case, you have to use the chi-square test. Example, you see that now you want to know the relationship between the gender and voting preferences. Use the chi-square test. And the correlation is another analysis method. Pearson and Spearman I mentioned earlier. That measure the strength and the direction of your relationship. Get that correlation between the Harvard studies and GPA. Simple, you can use that method. Regression analysis, you always use in the regression analysis. Where you can use the purpose. You need to predict the value, examine causes effect relationship. Example, you can get predict income based on educational level. The other important method, I think you see that people, researchers are using logistic regression. So here you can use the logistic regression in case of predict binary outcome. You maybe sometime predict likelihood of loan default, yes or no. But in that case, you can use the logistic regression. And also some students ask in the factor analysis. That is another analysis method. Where you can use the case of identify latent variable. The purpose is identify the latent variable. Example, grouping related survey item into construct. Not only that, now another important analysis method is called structural equation modeling. That is SEM. Analyze complex relationship among variable. The model customer satisfaction using multiple indicators. This is a good example. So how you can use structural model. Get that idea on that. The common quantitative analysis method. So the based on that mention that your research question objective, just try to use that kind of analysis method. And depend on that, the particular, the focusing, or the descriptive, or maybe comparative, or maybe impact, or based on that, so you have to select the particular method. And then it's better to give idea to for the students what are the steps to be followed in selecting the right method. I put that as the point base now. Now, step in selecting the right method. Now, this is the way you can select the right method or the best method. Step number one, first, very clearly you define your research objective or goal clearly. Because it is very important, looking at, as mentioned earlier, research objective or the goal, so you have to select the method. And the second step, my dear students, you have to understand the types and distribution of your data. I explain you that all these matters now. And the third step, determine the relationship you are testing. It may be association, it may be differences, it may be my student prediction. And the fourth one, check the assumption of statistical technique. Fifth one, the use decision tree, or if you like, then this, or maybe the statistical guide if need. So the very important point here is that if you have not confidence, so what can you do? Certainly, you have a freedom to consult the statistical expert, or maybe software output. Basically, undergraduate you have the software output like SPS, Startup, VViews, R, and Minitab, whatever. I think lots are there. It doesn't matter. So you can use anything. Consult the statistical expert. Now that is the way I think. So you have to, that you can select the best or the right method. That is. Yes, it is student. Now it's, I think further to elaborate, we will get the example, the real world example I will explain. Now when you select when you are going to select the particular method or the best analysis tool, I can give the idea on that. If you do not select the correct method, so it will really impact to the dimensions, your reliability and the value of your finding. So get the idea on that. I can try to give using the example in this way. Let's say you are going to examine whether employee training affect productivity and whether this relationship moderated by year of experience, because some students are asking, so we can use the whether moderating or mediating effect, whatever those kind of questions they are asking that. So here I think good example actually the moderating variable here. So this is what actually particular research is going to that. You are going to examine the whether employee training, you have done the training, the particular training affect the productivity. And also you are going to check whether this relationship is moderated by year of experience. So in that case, now these are the, I think, key variable in your case, productivity. As you have to use the ratio, that particular variable, continuous variable. The continuous variable, which means that is even that continuous mean that is, you can see the range and the she wrote, even decimal point, you can see that infinitive numbers that if you divide it by the infinitive numbers, that's called the continuous. So if you get that basically continuous and discrete numbers, continuous mean that is the range is there, even decimal point is there, but discrete numbers you cannot see the decimal point. So that's the productivity. So you can, it's a continuous variable, that is the ratio base, and the training, that is binary, yes, no. And the experience continuous, the moderator. So these are the key, I think, key variable. So looking at that, actually that research issue, then what the statistical tool, analysis tool you have to use. The right analysis tool in this case, remember that multiple regression with interaction term to access especially the moderation effect. So you have to select the multiple regression with interaction term. So that is actually the point. So you have to understand. Otherwise, you can see the choosing a simple t-test in that case would be ignore the moderating role of experience and leading to incomplete insight. So that is actually the point. So you have to understand that if you do not select really correct and accurate analysis method, really it will impact your finding. And for give another example, my dear students. So your research question is, remember that. So we'll take the example this way. Suppose that your research question this way is there is a significant relationship between study hours and GPA, because simply everybody can understand. That's what I got this kind of example. Is there you are going to test, is there a significant relationship between study hours and GPA? So what is the best tool to select? Very simply, you can select the Pearson correlation or the linear regression, that case. Not only, another example, we'll get that. Example number 2, research question, we see, that is, we'll see that. Do males and females differ in max test score? Yeah, female and yeah. So we are going to check differ in the mathematics test score. What is the best tool? In that case, my students, you see that I explain you that you can select the independent sample t-test. Independent sample. Get another example. Your research question, does, see here, does your marketing strategy affect customer purchase behavior across region? Then what is actually the best tool? In that case, the research question is, does marketing strategy affect the customer purchase behavior across the region? Best tool. So you can use here ANOVA if the data are continuous, chi-square if the data are categorical. Remember, we have the data set the categorical base, so you are with non-parametric like chi-square. So in that case, depend on that data set. If the continuous, that is maybe continuous mean maybe ratio or interval data. So in that case, you can use the ANOVA, or and your data is categorical based. Now you have to use the chi-square. Right. So then I took that now if you at the cost of using the wrong tool, if you use the wrong tool now it will really impact, as I mentioned. Incorrect analysis method might is to remember that lead to false positive or negative sometimes. And not only that, it really undermine policy decision based on your flawed research. And also it result in retraction and the fear rejection. Another important point is that is you waste your time and the resources. So that's actually the point. So I have to convey to you that now that if you do not select the best method, the best analysis tool or best analysis method, I don't think that your conclusion is really wrong. So we have seen that I think the lot of cases with the undergraduate case now they use some kind of tool without understanding. Now that's what we try to give the idea on that. Really, actually, I gave only the basic idea on that, and I think that's very very important for your research. And now if you look at this, I think this slide my dear students, and here also I put into the all what I discussed up to now into the one table. So here, if your research is the goal, if your research goal is descriptive characteristic, so these are the type of variable you have to get that. Nominal, ordinal, interval, and the ratio. The recommended method, remember that descriptive statistic. Your research goal objective is the described characteristic. You can use the nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. In that case, recommended method to the students descriptive statistic. And you are going to compare two groups. Type of variable in that case, remember, categorical independent and continuous dependent variable. You can use my independent t-test or maybe non-parametric test, Whitney U-test. You are going to compare more than two groups. Your research goal is you are going to compare more than two groups. They are my students. Categorical independent continuous dividend variable. Continuous dependent variable. What is the recommended method? I recommend to use the ANOVA with the Kruskal-Wallis. So your research goal is to measure association. There use two continuous variable. In that case, my student, you can use the Pearson or Spearman correlation. You are going to predict continuous outcome. One or more independent variable. That time, so you can use my linear or multiple regression. So that you are going to predict binary outcome. Then the binary dependent variable, then you can use the logistic regression. The logistic regression, always remember that binary, that is a dependent variable, you can use the binary type data. Then the control multiple variable, then you can use the multiple independent variable. In that case, you can use the recommended method. I recommend you the ANCOVA and the multiple regression and the something like. Then the explorer construct, like a factors, there you can use the multiple items or maybe latent variable. So that context I recommend to use the factor analysis or the structural modeling. Actually, today discussion I want to give the idea on this one actually. So just get the idea and then you do the, especially when you're engaging with the quantitative research. And finally, now that is the first. This I want to conclude. I think what we discussed this pattern. Remember that it's a very important point is that you have to match method with your purpose, especially in quantitative research. The selection of the analysis method should be deliberate and the data driven, not automatic or the habitual. Remember that researcher must ensure that the method aligned with their research objective, the data meet statistical assumption, and the results are interpretable and valid. So the use in the right tool not only enhance the credibility of your study, but also ensure your finding can inform practice, policy, told you that even the future research with confidence. And so the other key point I have to mention that now, this is my advising, you have to choose the right tool depend on your research design and the data type, even though I gave this kind of idea. That is you have to choose the right tool you depend on your research and the data type. And also the profile, alignment of NGO validity and the clear insight. And also very importantly, always you have to check the assumption before applying method. And the final I want to advise this is, that is, I know that some students now, they are not really perfect to use some statistic. So in that context, even you have a freedom, especially for the research, consult the statistician, especially the methodologies or the use software like, different are there. So you can use the what you familiarize to you. And also the remember, interpret the result in the context of the research question is a very important. So actually, these are the things today. Actually, I think these are the kind of reference you further to learn. That is, I referred. Now you can use that all these reference and this research design. All these matters are really stressful, and all these are available in the internet. The discovery strategy using IBM. All these are really available, right? So just try to refer in order to improve enhance your knowledge. Okay. Now that's actually the idea actually I have to give that for you that selecting this method. Even now I continually talk, I think now this time is, what is the time is now, what is the close to the 7 o'clock. So then I will give that actually another half an hour to discuss actually, as I mentioned, there are particular methods are there. Simply I can give that some idea how to use that, some t-test and whatever the thing that is. Right. So having concluded this session, I will move to the next part now to give the idea on that. So here, what I want to discuss with you. Now this is the start discussion, because I gave the idea on the what kind of t-test, ANOVA and the whatever chi-square method. But I will give that now, the simple idea on that, how to use them, where you can use that, what are the type of tests, all these matters. So within half an hour, I'm going to discuss with you, especially to give the rough idea on that. First, we will start to discuss on the comparative studies. Especially now, remember that when you're going to use the comparative studies. So in that case, as I mentioned, you can use the t-test, ANOVA, chi-square like a test. We will discuss in brief how you can use that and all this. What are the important, the basic things, so you have to know when you use the t-test, ANOVA and the chi-square, these matters, and try to discuss. So first we will take, my dear student, that is, in the case of the comparative study, the one important method that you can use is the t-test. So what is the purpose of the t-test? Using the t-test. Now the purpose is, my dear students, t-tests are used to compare, as I mentioned earlier, the mean of two groups to determine if there is a statistically significant difference between them. There are a type of t-test, independent sample test, where you can use it, where compare means between two independent groups. Examples in that, you want to compare the males and females, you can use the independent sample t-test. And another type of t-test is called the fair sample t-test, where you can use the situation where compare mean from the same group at different time. Example, pre-test or the first test, before and after that case use. The other type of t-test is called the one sample t-test. Test whether the mean of a single group different from known or hypothesized population. In that case, you can. So the very important point you have to mention that is, remember that when you use the kind of statistical tool and the test, so you have to consider the assumption. What are the assumptions when you use the t-test? Remember that the data is continuous, that is in, or maybe the interval or the ratio. You cannot use, remember that when you use the t-test, you cannot use that the numerical and another mention, that is, You see the 4 types of data, that is rank data. Ordinal data, you cannot use that. Remember that the data should be interval or the ratio. And the data should be normally distributed. And also remember that variance are equal in case of especially the independent sample. And also remember that your observations are independent. There should not be any autocorrelation, that is observation. So these are the kind of assumptions. Remember that when you use the t-test now, you have to test that now whether that assumption now violate, or if violate, remember that it will really impact your finding on the result and the conclusion and whatever the recommendation. So get the example where you can use the t-test here. The example here, suppose that you are going to comparing average sales performance between 2 different regional offices. So in that case, my dear students, you can use the t-test. It's the best method, I think. And then give a few minutes to discuss how you can use the analysis of variance ANOVA. What is the purpose of using the ANOVA or the analysis of variance? The purpose is, remember that is really ANOVA is tend to the logic of the t-test to 3 or more group, which means it determines whether there are any statistical significant differences between the means of multiple independent groups. There are type of ANOVA, one-way ANOVA, two-way ANOVA, repeated measures ANOVA, something like. You get the one-way ANOVA where you can use in order to test difference in mean across one independent variable with more than 2 level. Example, that you are going to compare satisfaction across the 3 departments, and you can use the one-way ANOVA. The other type of ANOVA is called two-way ANOVA, that test the effect of 2 independent variable and their interaction on dependent variable. And also another third type is called the repeated measures ANOVA, that is used when the same subject are measures multiple times under different conditions. So the important matter I have to discuss the assumption. When you use the ANOVA, these are the sort of assumptions, so you have to take into account. The independent variables are continuous. They are also, you cannot use that nominal data and ordinal data. You have to use the dependent variables are continuous. Group are independent, normally distributed data, and also the homogeneity of variance. That is, there should not be any heterogeneity here. Homogeneity of variance must. The example where you can apply the ANOVA is, you are going to evaluate the customer satisfaction level across multiple branches of retail chain. This, I think, good method is ANOVA. So there are actually the post-hoc test and something like, I'm not going to even, that is, if ANOVA results are significant, then the post-hoc test like a Turkey, there are used to determine which groups are different methods are there, I think. It depends now where you can. Chi-square is another important statistical test.
Sir,
yes.
So for the disruption. So I sharing something, sir. So we cannot see your screen.
I see. That is. We can see. What is the wrong with that? Wait. What about now? Can you see now?
Yeah, we can see.
I see. Very sorry. Yeah, but it's all this. It doesn't matter. I can share this. Or once I complete this, I can really give that all this what I discuss, all this material, put into the chat box, and you can give them, right? Okay.
Okay, sir. Go on.
Okay.
No, it's fine.
Okay, right. Now, actually, another method is, because we have to watch in time, you want the heavy rain to here, then I have to manage it that. So very quickly, I will discuss this matter, right? Okay. The chi-square test. Chi-square test is another important, I think, student are asking now whether we can use this one, where we can use all these matters are used. That's what I try to give the basic idea on that. A chi-square test, my dear student, what is the purpose? To use chi-square test assess whether there is a significant association between categorical variable. So there you have to use a categorical variable. So categorical variable, now you see that in your case, sometimes you use the female you categorize in the male, female, you categorize is your department, university. These are called categorical variable. So in that case, remember that you have to use the chi-square test. So there are type of chi-square tests. Chi-square test for independence, chi-square goodness fit test. The chi-square test of independence basically, so you can determine whether two categorical variables are independent. And the chi-square good fitness of test, my dear student, you can determine whether a sample matches the expected distribution. So importantly, the assumption you have to take into the assumption. Remember that when you use the chi-square test, the data should be categorical, a nominal or ordinal, right? That's the point you have to understand. The observations are independent, and also here also the data points observation also expected frequency in each cell is at least five observations. So you have to use that, because I show that there are small sample case, so you can use some non-parametric test. So the below, I think 9 observation you can use for that. That is, I think in my practice I use that. That is called simple the small sample. That. So then important point, my dear student, I have to understand that chi-square test, basically you have to use the data set categorical. So and the example now I put that here, the test whether there is association between gender and preference for the product type. That time, so you can there, you are going to test the whether there is an association between gender and preference for a product type. So it's better to use the chi-square test. So this method actually, that is comparison method I put into the one here, and the t-test, ANOVA, and the chi-square, and the type of data, all these matters I put that. And now here you can see the data. So because here the t-test, one column you can see the t-test, in that case a data type continuous, the number of group 2, and the compare means, and example use case comparing test score between two schools. ANOVA continuous, 3 or more groups, and that case you can compare mean, comparing employee satisfaction and across department. Chi-square case, there you have to use the data type. You see, categorical 2 or more, that you have to compare with the frequencies, proportion, and you can analyze the relationship between age group and voting, something like. So finally, you have to choose the point I have to mention that now. The t-test, ANOVA, and chi-square test are fundamental tool in comparative study. Remember that? Each suited to different research questions and the data type. Remember, choosing the appropriate test depend on the scales of measurement, number of groups, and also the hypothesis being tested. When used correctly, these tests provide robust insight into differences and association among variables, and also remember that contribute to the informed decision making in research and practice. So having discussed that comparative type of data tool, we'll move to discuss the very important, because the students, I think, the always rising question that the regression, when they use the regression, I'm going to discuss the basic thing to be taken into your mind. So the regression, remember that regression analysis is a powerful statistical method used to examine the relationship between the dependent variable and the one or more independent variable. It is widely used in research. You see the variable economics, finance, business, and the social variable. For both, remember, predictive modeling and also the causal inference. So get the idea to further to elaborate the purpose of regression analysis. Remember that, my dear students, where you are going to the regression, now understand that these are the purpose. I have understood that regression help to predict the value of the independent variable based on known values of independent variable. The other case, understand the strength and the direction of the relation between variable, my dear student, you can use the regression. Not only that, if you want to identify which variable significantly impact on the outcome, then you can use the regression. So I clearly mentioned the where you can use the regression. Regression, these are the key points, so you have to remember, right? when you use, that is regression analysis, remember that. And also then now you student ask, there are type of regression, basically simple linear regression, multiple regression, parallel regression, and there are, I think, lot of things are there. But here again, the basic idea, the type of regression I use especially undergraduate level. So you are always with the simple linear regression. Basically in that context, this is an important point you have to understand. It's in all the one independent variable and one dependent variable. An important point is, remember that the assume a linear relation, linear relationship. So I have some water, right? Then why the students here, y always dependent variable, x is the independent variable, and the b0 is that is intercept, and the bi is a slope coefficient. And also remember that error terms always there, that we, because we can get the perfect confidence level. In that case, you can assign the some error term like 5% or maybe 10%, maybe 1%, and it's depend on that. I think it's better the below 10% is better error term. So example where you can use the simple linear regression, that is predicting the student's final exam score based on your study hours. Then simply you can use the simple linear. And the other things students are using, that is the multiple linear regression. Multiple linear regression, my dear student. What is the, here that can involve two or more independent variable predicting the dependent variable. So the example you see that here, the estimating house price based on your size, location, or maybe the age of house. See the other type of, I think student asking some kind of, what do you mean by the logistic regression? Is a logistic regression is another type of regression. The logistic regression, my dear students, where you can use when the dependent variable is a categorical. Remember that condition is there when you use the logistic regression. The always remember that dependent variable is a categorical, typically binary, yes or no. That is, you assign the 0 and 1 something, that is, this is called the categorical variable, the binary variable. Always remember that logistic regression, dependent variable is the categorical variable, other variable may be categorical or maybe non-categorical variable, all these, the continuous and other variable. Then the predict the probability that observation belong to certain category. Another the important where you can use the logistic regression. You have to, you need to, if you need to predict the probability that observation belong to the certain category, then of course you can use the logistic regression. This is the example. You can predict whether customer will buy product, yes or no, based on your age and income. That case now, my dear students, you can see here that is yes or no question, that is a product dependent variable, and the age and income, now you can get the variable. These are continuous variable, and you can run your regression. The independent variable as age and income, and dependent variable is a yes no question, the product, then you can use it then. And apart from that, there are other types of polynomial regression, that is fit the nonlinear relationship, and also the other, you see the lesser regression or the rich regression. Use when you see that when you use the multiple regression, some condition assumption is that there should not be any multicollinearity among and the independent variable. So here the rich or lesser regression means the lesser stand for the least absolute shrinkage and the selection operator. So in the where when multicollinearity is present, so you can use that kind of method. But here, the finally, so I have to very clearly mention that when you use the regression, there are assumptions. Especially where I'm going to discuss the assumption of the linear regression. The student always asking that this kind of thing. Remember that when you use the regression, single or multiple or whatever, you have to, I think, take into account this assumption. One assumption is, my dear students, you have to make linearity, which means that relationship between independent and dependent variable are linear. The one line should be there, otherwise dangerous. And the independence, that is observation, are independent. That is, there should not be autocorrelation. Independence, you have to manage. Observation are independent. And the homoscedasticity, constant variance of residual, now that is we call heterogeneous arch effect. heteroseductivity effect or something like. So you cannot, I think, you have to think about that assumption should be always that the constant variance of residual should be the constant variance. That is called homoseductivity. And the other important is the normality. Residual should be normally distributed. Not only that, no multicollinearity is an independent variable, as I mentioned, not too highly correlated, not too highly correlated. Now, these are actually the assumptions, so you have to take into account when you use the regression. Right? So then, that is the violation of these assumptions, remember, that can lead to misleading result and may require transformation or alternative model, remember that. And another important things I have to discuss, the key metrics in regression analysis. Some students asking that kind of thing. These are the key metrics regression analysis. So if we were looking at the R-square, p-value, if statistic, standard error, and these are very important, the regression model. That is, if you get the R-square, that is another important key metrics in regression analysis. Yeah, R-square means that is the proportion of the variance in the dependent variable explained by the model. Some practitioners have said that now at that R risk actually they at least more than 50%, close to the 1 actually, close to the 100. That is actually the practitioner. It's very close to the 100 or close to the 1. It's better, I think. Otherwise, dangerous. And the adjusted R means the adjust R risk for the number of predictors the model, and also the p-value is a very important key metric in regression. It's indicate whether coefficients are statistically significant. You know that the p-value below 0.5, now we'll tell in that particular, the variable is significant, statistically significant. And also the another important key metrics in regression analysis, the if statistic. So it is a test overall significance of the model, where that's if it is significant, now they can see the overall that model is good, even though some independent variable are not significant, but if statistic is significant, so you can say that now this is overall model is significant based on that. To some extent you can conclude that, but anyhow, that is some extent now really you can get the actually the 100% reliable finding that. And the final in standard error, my dear students, measure the average distance that observe values from the regression line. And the final point I would mention, the applications of regression analysis, really, economics, finance, marketing, and healthcare, wherever. It's really economic, estimating consumption or investment function. Finance, modeling risk return relationship, we always use that. Marketing, focused in sales and customer behavior. Healthcare, it is the different area. Social science, evaluating the impact of education policy, something like that. But anyhow, that is the finally point I have to tell that there are limitations. Always the correlation not equal to the causation. Regression, so association, not causal, to remember that. And the outlier and the influential point can distort your result. And the overfitting, too many variables can remember to overlay complex model that do not generalize well. And the model assumption violate can lead to the incorrect inferences. Now, these are actually the key points so you have to take into account. And finally, I have to tell that regression analysis is a fundamental tool for analyzing relationship between variable, predicting outcome, and making informed decision. By selecting the appropriate type of regression and the check-in assumption, researcher can gain valuable insight into pattern within their data. However, care must be taken into interpret the result correctly, especially regarding causality and the model fitting. So that is actually the thing. So today actually I want to discuss with you, especially I have to convey message my insight in the research. Once I do, when I engage in the research, now having all these matters actually I conduct in the research. I think this now actually the time is 7:11. I think it's enough to discuss today. So if you have any clarification, so it doesn't matter, my phone is there, my number is there, anytime you can discuss. Right? That's actually my dear friends, today I want to give that idea on that. So having said that, now the discussion is like conclude now. Remember that your research, especially the quantitative research, when you select the best, your finding really depend on really the the method you are choosing. You have to select the right method, otherwise, remember that it will really impact your validity and the reliability of finding, and also simply so you cannot get the meaningful conclusion, even you cannot recommend. So having said that, I good luck to you, and so if you have any clarification, it's up to you now discuss. For that we'll leave the 5 minutes because I have to engage in other activities. 7:30. Yes, Friday. Yes. Yes, shall we conclude now? What is
So in this platform, they cannot use their mic, right?
all right,
So
it's better conclude, no?
yeah, they can use only Q&A session. They can put into chat if they have questions.
Okay. Are there any questions? No questions up to now.
So far, yeah. So far
Is
we
that,
have
yeah, it's
no
better to
questions.
conclude now. At least, why you wasting our time? No, right?
Yes, it seems like we don't have questions.
Okay, my student. Now, thank you very much for joining with us. Even thanks for the today the organizing committee, the effort and the made. I think so. Then I think we'll actually my attempt is to really enhance your research skill. So that's I think it's better to when you do the research. Actually, you should have a good confidence about the not only that even the methodology and the analysis tool and the whatever thing, but anyhow you just try to I think manage it that now by listening and discussing and learning all these methods. Okay, good luck to you once again. Thank you very much, the Rashmi and the Raratna. So you are, I think your support and the effort you made to like successfully give this discussion, right? Okay, good luck, good night to you all.
So we'll go for the rest of the proceedings, sir.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. So, with that note, very good evening to our esteemed guest and to the respected audience again. So, it's truly an honor for me to deliver the word of thanks on behalf of the Department of Accountancy and Finance, Faculty of Management Studies, Sabaragamuwa University of Sri Lanka. So, marking the successful conclusion of the 13th session of the Thesis Master Program of 2025. And as well, to begin with, I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to today's speaker, Professor D.G. Dharmarathna, Professor, Department of Accountancy and Finance, Faculty of Management Studies. So, dear sir, your session was truly thought-provoking and deeply insightful, and we are grateful for your knowledge that you have been shared with us today. And as well, I also wish to convey my sincere gratitude to the Faculty of Management Studies, led by Professor Athasi Janapala, for providing unwavering support towards initiatives like this. And as well, in particularly, I would like to express my deep appreciation to Professor T.U.I. Piris, Head, Department of Accountancy and Finance, whose foresight and commitment have been instrumental in bringing this program to this life. And as well, my special thanks goes to Professor Jonathan Devasiri, the main coordinator of the program, for his continuous encouragement and invaluable guidance throughout this series. And as well, a warm note of appreciation goes to our dedicated organizing team, Mr. Sajid, Ms. Rashmi, Ms. Shanika, Ms. Madhusha, and Mr. Dakshina, whose hard work and attention to detail ensured the smooth flow of this session. Last but not at least, a sincere thank to all participants, including academics, researchers, and students, for your enthusiastic engagement and presence, which greatly contributed to the success of the today's session. So we warmly invite you to join us again for our upcoming next session of this thesis mastery program titled on Interpreting and Presenting Research Findings Effectively. That session will be delivered by Professor T.C. Gamage, attached to the Department of Marketing Management, Faculty of Management Studies of Sabaragamuwa Institute of Sri Lanka. So with that note, thank you all once again for being here today with us and wishing you a pleasant evening ahead.